Quai is the only scalable proof of work blockchain that has EVM-compatible smart contracts, which is super useful for builders, people that want to get on a blockchain really easily and tie it into what they know and love already.
Mic drop,
And
dude.
yeah, our goal is to tap into the compute economy, as I said earlier, and revolutionize proof of work.
Welcome to the ATX DAO podcast, the hub for exploring the forefront of blockchain technology and Austin's Web3 community. Your hosts, Nick, Mason, Luke, and Ash, connect you with innovators within ATX DAO and beyond as we venture into the world of decentralized technology. So crack open a beer and join us for a front row seat to learn about the innovations and trends shaping our digital future. This is the ATX DAO podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to a very special episode of the ATX DAO podcast. We are live from the Quai Network offices in Austin, Texas, with Alan Orwick, the CEO and founder, and a Genesis ATX DAO member. So pumped to be here. We're going to chat 30, 45 minutes about what Quai is, talk about the renaissance that's happening in the proof of work community, talk about the way that he built Quai in Austin, and just learn about his background in general. Yeah. And then just see where the conversation goes, right?
Yeah, let's let it free flow. Mason, thank you for having me. Excited to be on the ATX DAO podcast and glad to be here in Austin and growing the crypto space, growing the crypto community. Let's dive in.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and just so everybody knows, like, Quai is one of my favorite projects in Austin because they're really built in Austin. And like, I think it was 2 years ago at Consensus, we did this giant party, and the sticker and the name and everything about it was like, keep Austin Web3, crypto built in Austin. And it's true. Like, and I'm going to pass over to you and let you talk about your background, but just like Quai is years and years in Austin, and like, it's very cool. We'll get into it, but Alan, if you could just tell us a little bit about like your background, how you got into crypto, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So background, previously software engineering. So went to the University of Texas, again, Austin relation, and grew Texas Blockchain there, which was the student organization for blockchain and curriculum. And that also led to research. So we were able to get a research organization in which we had a lot of like-minded people studying blockchain, cryptography, hash functions, zero knowledge, you name it. And a lot of those ideas that we had at UT have now made their way into Quai Network. So that original founding group consisted of myself, my professor, and some of their colleagues. And we were able to get National Science Foundation backing from an SBIR Phase 1 grant. That original paper was called Block Reduce. And then we were able to get further papers out of that research group. After UT, ended up working at Apple as a software engineer. So I was actually over on Palmer Lane on the North and South American supply chains as a business development and a business intelligence software engineer. And that kind of big company experience got a little old, and I said, let's get back into the crypto space and let's get more kind of back to the grassroots of that research. So was able to pick up some of that and get the main sort of founding team back together and make Quai a real product and take some of that research, turn it into reality, and then again, sort of just grow the community and the product. So got backing eventually from Polychain Capital and Alumni Ventures and have grown here in Austin.
Yeah, man. So with I want to dive into the Texas blockchain organization you built. But so before you were at UT, like how long have you been in crypto?
Yeah, good question. So since about 2015, I would say, I kind of got into Bitcoin whenever it was around $400 to $500. I didn't have a ton of money to buy because I was actually in high school at the time, but was super interested in technology, super interested in just those kind of random things that came about and going on forums and finding interesting things. Was able to get into Ethereum, and I think that was when it was around like $40, $30. And again, just trying to understand how all of this technology worked and apply myself and dive in and really just try to get at the ground of these technologies.
Yeah, cool. And then so you found out about crypto in high school. You were like starting to fiddle around with it there. When in college, like when was that moment? Because so like Texas Blockchain as an organization at UT is the first blockchain organization there.
Yeah, it was. So it was pretty early for all blockchain organizations as well. I remember going to UT and being in the computer science Facebook and like searching the word Bitcoin. Yeah. And people would like post about it in like 2012, 2013. They're like, oh, it's a scam, or like, oh, it's not a big deal. And it's a pretty serious group. Like UT computer science is pretty legit. Like it's up there with Berkeley, some of the other universities. And there's a lot of people that were not taking it very seriously, and there's some that were. And so getting to UT and seeing, okay, like there's a ton of really talented people, a lot of really good researchers, and as a whole, it's a very academically excellent place. But no one's taking crypto seriously. No one's taking blockchain seriously. And I kind of saw the trend, and I saw all of the things that were happening. And that was sort of at the I guess that fall of 2016 at the time. And I was like, hey guys, we got to get like a group together here. We got to get a bunch of people that are excited about this. And we started to form that group. And I think what really kicked it off actually is when I did my internship at Q2E Banking, which is the sponsorship now of the Austin FC Stadium.
Oh, okay.
And and they're a fintech company here. And I was an intern there. It was right after my freshman year. And I was like, hey guys, we got to look at Ethereum since you guys are in the fintech space. I think it's super interesting in terms of programmable money, the assets there that can be utilized, just the future in terms of payments and banking and software infrastructure. And of course, Q2 is more on like traditional banking software. They're like, okay, we can connect the mom and pop banks out in Lampasas to get a banking app that connects them to their Wells Fargo or the local bank, as opposed to like super grand vision. Like they had a very direct path, but I was like, hey, this could be something that could be interesting, and maybe one day people will have crypto bank accounts and they'll be able to access this in a similar way in your app. Yeah. And that idea was kind of shot down, and they were like, it's not there yet. And so that's kind of whenever I saw like the real practical applications of connecting traditional finance with decentralized finance with decentralized applications and having that bridge into the real world, which I thought was super cool, but didn't really get the footing at the time. So that kind of motivated me to like get back to campus that returning fall, and was like, hey, let's really start this so that we can prove it out. We can build this, we can build the community, we can build the ecosystem, we can educate these students that are super excited and passionate about it as well. And that's kind of really when it caught fire, because everyone was like, had a place to go and learn. And then we also were able to get classes. So the first hour accredited course actually through UT that we taught, I believe we've done that every semester since. So having that be kind of a long-standing thing in which not only students can learn, but professionals could come in, talk about their products, talk about what they're building as well, and then connect those people is just a really interesting sort of nexus. And that kind of led the main path there.
So how hard, so you're talking about like people weren't taking it seriously at UT, so you wanted to start something new. How hard was it to get it started?
Yeah, it's pretty challenging. And I think at the time, sort of like the origin story, it was like a couple other people like had a similar idea as well. Right. And like we were fortunate because like we kind of like did the right thing in terms of like the university, like applying for it as a club, getting some of the things that we needed, like in terms of sponsorship as a professor, because you needed a professor to actually like make sure it's viable and a real thing. So they have to kind of like sponsor it. And then kind of getting everyone together like consistently, because like you're going to start something, you have to make sure you're just consistently showing up and doing it, and you don't want to fall off. So there's a certain level of like leadership and just sort of aptitude and ensuring to, grow the organization. And for us, we got in and were able to kind of bring in the people that kind of had smaller groups that were focused on blockchain or crypto more ad hoc, and then loop them into Texas blockchain as a whole and as an organization. And then what's really difficult about blockchain in terms of struggling at UT is there's a lot of different departments that a blockchain club could fall under. I was a CS student, and ultimately we landed under engineering. And I think engineering, since my time as president, it moved to McCombs more so. And so it's always kind of been between those three schools because they're different schools. And at UT as well, computer science isn't in the same school as engineering. So for organizations, there's not very many that are kind of cross-department. Right. And so having that oversight was just kind of always a challenge. It's like, where does this thing live? It's across many different areas. And I think even more so, it's evolved to be bringing in potentially some of the sort of law school as well. Yeah. As well as even sort of more of like the kind of like arts and design too across like the NFT space. So I think Texas blockchain has kind of emerged to be more like multidisciplinary, which is super cool to see. And that was kind of one of the main things ultimately now that I think they still struggle with is like, where does this live and how do we ensure we're marketing to the right people and getting the right people in? Yeah,
it's really hard to maintain a university organization. Yeah. Because you have to, people graduate.
And you got to make sure you hand it off and like things change. And I think even at one point there was like the MBA blockchain organization. Yeah. And they only do MBAs for 2 years. So I was like, how are you guys efficiently kind of getting that through? But
Graduate Blockchain Society,
So it's been cool to kind of see that evolve.
Yeah, Roberto's wife was like I don't know if she was the president, but she was like running that for a while.
Nice.
But yeah, that one's extra hard to keep going. I'm not sure necessarily like if it's grown that much.
I think it's on and off because I think like a lot of times for them,
well,
like
2 years,
when the
like
professor
crypto might be
has
at
it-
zero. You're right.
Exactly. And yeah, so like that's the thing that wanes too, especially with crypto. It's like some meetings were 200 people, and like, you know, whenever it was like ICOs 2017, you like rooms were packed.
Yeah.
And then like 2019, you're like, we're giving away all the pizza in the world, and like nobody wants to come. So there is a ton of variance, especially within crypto, and I think nowadays it's kind of more sustained, which is good. And I think that kind of goes just as the markets evolve and as the technology evolves. So hopefully it kind of levels out just in terms of like organization's sake and balance. But you're absolutely right. It is hard to maintain.
Did you come into the? We'll get off of school in a second. There's
No worries.
There's a natural transition, but did you go into school like thinking crypto is what you wanted to do, or did you have like an epiphany moment?
No, I mean, it was across a lot of different areas. I've just always kind of been a hacker, like tinker with technology. And I think that's where a lot of people in crypto kind of find themselves is like, I know how to kind of work my way through technology, and crypto is just super interesting. So throughout my school as well, I kind of did a ton of different things like AI, 3D printing.
Nice.
One of my first kind of design projects was 3D printed shoes. And then I think like 3 years later, Adidas had 3D printed shoes. So kind of looking at that, and I just think experimenting on the forefront of innovation is super exciting. So crypto is one of those places. Yeah, no, literally. Like it's, and I think like that's the place to be, man. Like that's like what brings people together, what brings new ideas. It helps everyone evolve as humans and making life easier and better.
Yeah, the manifest destiny in the digital world.
Hey, we're gonna have either us build it or GPT-5. So I'd rather us build it.
Yeah. So one thing that I like so much about Quai from your like the way you've built it. First question. How many employees do you have right now?
I think we're at about 20.
Okay, so that's incredible, right? Like that's a real organization. But one of my favorite things about what you did is you built the pipeline, right? Can you talk about like how you, I guess, staffed your organization through, like, I guess the Texas blockchain to Quai pipeline is very cool to me. So like, can you talk about the growth of your organization? Like, it's just you and Trilemma, I guess, as the advisor, right?
And then Carl's been super instrumental as well.
Yeah, of course.
And then we've been able to recruit a ton of great people. Shakara is one of our main engineers, and he's just a wizard at all things tech.
So who came up with the fundamental tech behind Quai?
So that's Carl's idea, actually.
Okay,
So he's the main gigabrain and innovator there.
Yeah.
And so he brought that idea to Sriram, and it was like, let's get some students working on this. And fortunately enough, we had been kind of working with Sriram as our advisor for Texas blockchain. And so we all got together and had that lab work on that idea, which is what I referenced earlier, that block reduced paper. So that paper kind of started the nexus of what then turned into Quai, because technically it's how do we organize a sort of multi-blockchain network in a way that optimizes the bandwidth and latency to essentially increase throughput. Because if we tie it to the geography, so like physically running blockchains in different parts of the world, then they'll operate faster, almost kind of like Amazon data centers. Like if I want better ping because I'm playing COD and I have a Warzone map, I might connect to Amazon US East 2 because I'm out in Florida or something. So that sort of comparison was like very logically applied to blockchain, because if you look at Bitcoin's global. So if I want to run Bitcoin, I don't get to run my one sort of computer at a subset of the Bitcoin network. I talk globally. And so there's a almost restriction there. But that was that main idea that Carl applied. And we did that with proof of work. And we did that with the idea of having many different blockchain networks interwoven together. So essentially coordinating them in a way that we can maximize the bandwidth, lower the latency, improve the throughput, and essentially make a better, faster Bitcoin or Ethereum or blockchain.
The merged mining, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's the process of interweaving them. So creating redundant security by mining many of those blockchains together. So we take one blockchain, we break it up into many different pieces, and then you have to find a way to put those pieces back together. And we do that with merged mining. And that actually is one of the main things that the blockchains we use today sort of struggle with, is you can break up a blockchain very easily with layer 2s, kind of fragmentation, other layer 1s, but how do you tie them back together? And in proof of stake, that's a little harder. So I know we'll get to like the proof of work, proof of stake, and the renaissance with proof of work there. But in proof of work, there's a very objective and definable way of doing that with merged mining and with those references between blockchains directly. That isn't as subjective or bounded by time with proof of stake.
Yeah, I think when I first like started learning about Quai with you said that it was like the best way to solve the blockchain trilemma, right? So how is that? How does it solve the blockchain trilemma?
Yeah, so the trilemma being security, decentralization, and throughput really is not very well defined. And it's kind of more something that Vitalik pulled out one day because we don't really know how to decide how to define decentralization. We don't really know how to define security. Like, sure, there's an economic threshold in which you're looking at finalization over time based off of the total value in the system or the value that's applied by the miners or the validators. But ultimately, the trilemma sort of exists as a bounds in which various blockchains make certain sacrifices. Bitcoin being the most secure and decentralized and very limited and scalable than Bitcoin, but still limited compared to something like Solana that's like, will have very limited decentralization and certain levels of liveness guarantees with very high throughput.
Yeah, very high.
But they make that trade-off and they're okay with that. And in Quai, I would say we walk a different barrier in which we're making different sacrifices. So going back to the idea of breaking up that one monolithic blockchain into many different pieces, we introduce almost a time delay in which those blockchains come together and they resolve, which allows us to increase throughput without sacrificing decentralization or security, because they all sort of run more independently as a more sort of modular set of chains or parallelized or multi-threaded set of chains. But eventually they become one blockchain. And that time delay of them all becoming one unified blockchain sort of moves into what we call like a tetralemma or beyond the trilemma. And you have to go read our docs on that one. I can't pull all the resources out for that right now. But that's kind of where we introduce, because there's no free lunch in crypto. Yeah. Like if you were to say like, all right, like what are you doing to make this trade-off, increasing throughput without changing decentralization or security? You know, you'd kind of be like laughed out of the room. So there is a trade-off there, and it's in time.
So you're breaking it down, this time delay. So does that have an impact on the speed of your transactions?
No. So it would, going between these shards, depending on how many shards there are.
Okay.
And so if you are in a single shard, it's the same as Ethereum or some other blockchain that utilizes EVM contracts. And the trade-off when I talk about adding time is however many shards there are in the system, the longer it will take to go kind of across the network.
Okay.
And so
that has to do with geography too.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and that more of like network topology and network organization. So geography specifically, like being in America and running shard 3, for example, is very loose kind of in terms, because it's more of network optimization, and those aren't directly defined by borders and countries. It's more like, who am I going to run with and connect to and share data with? And that may decide where I run. But that time delay, kind of as you come across with the shards, depends on the shard count.
So if I'm doing Quai stuff in Antarctica, is it going to be a lot slower?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
So that interaction with the chain itself is completely outside of what the nodes are doing to resolve the different shards together. So you're still connecting to one of the shards, submitting a transaction like normal. It's just if I'm in Antarctica and I'm in shard 3 or shard 4, and I'm connecting or sending to a different shard, say like the shard in Europe, then I'm still sending my transaction in 10 seconds, but for it to go and re-reference itself in the other shard might take a minute, for example. It's almost like bridging. Yeah. So if you go from like...
You're bridging between the different shards.
Exactly. So if I'm going from like Ethereum to Base, well, there might be a minute delay. If I go back from base
to degen L3.
Exactly, yeah. So like add on the layers. So physically, I mean, Quai is 3 layers, and that's how we create those references across, because if I go from Antarctica to Europe, I might have to go all the way up to the prime chain that we call it, which is the sort of root chain in those layers, and then that might have to go back down to the sort of third layer.
You're like future-proofing yourself to not have to make other layers.
Exactly. That's the whole point. Yeah. And so you absolutely could, but we've created this base architecture in which we're saying we look at what these ecosystems have done, almost like Ethereum wanted to with their original sharding approach that they abandoned for rollups, and truly data sharding as opposed to just execution sharding. And there's nuance to some of that as well, and also nuance to like transaction parallelization and other technical pieces there. But true data sharding in which the state trees and the data in which you're interacting with is separated across different nodes and different blockchains.
Okay. And so this is actually, so you're future proofing, but it's better than rollups because rollups are inherently centralized. Arguably.
Arguably decentralized. They are becoming more decentralized as they get things like fraud proofs. And it's a rare take for me to say, rollups are a good thing. But to, play devil's advocate, yes, they're like becoming more progressively decentralized as you get things like validity proofs, fraud proofs.
But you're from the jump being like, we're preventing the risk of centralized.
Yeah. And then also
layers.
the time delays between those. So if you look at with Base, I know it might take, if you go directly on the main bridge, a couple of days or a week to even get back. Sometimes it's worse for other layer 2s, but addressing that with Quai from the very onset, because not only is there competition between fragmented layer 2s and the centralization risks there, but also competition on an economic level, because every L2 eventually wants to compete with other L2s, cannibalize those, and then compete with Ethereum as an asset. So if you're using something like Quai with a long-term roadmap of these many different shards being interwoven, that base asset will still be the Quai token, as opposed to many different things.
Yeah, all the different Ethereum layers are all frenemies.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
We're all Ethereum. We love each other, but
do they?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. And then you also have a lot of different versions of ETH. I got 5 different ETHs in a wallet, right? So that's hard to track. So with Quai, we want to keep a user experience that's very seamless and abstract that sharded system in a way that's friendly to users. And so it's hard because that's a lot of the challenges we get. It's like, what is Quai going to do now to get to that point of scale? Because you're building for this highly scalable future and this great technology. So then you kind of have to look at the flywheel and see where you exist today to bootstrap that ecosystem.
So how do you get Quai? How are you going to get Quai?
Yeah, mining. So proof of work, I think, is one of the best ways of distributing a token, a decentralized token. If you look at Bitcoin, it's highly available, has a good Gini coefficient, and was proof of work mined and still is bootstrapping this network of validators and people that are participating in the system. One of my favorite critiques of Ethereum itself is they actually say they have the best form of proof of stake because they were proof of work. So they had this really nice coin distribution for Ethereum and the Ether token, and then they switched it to proof of stake. So then it becomes more sort of value accrual to the people that are staking and having different ways of getting ETH now versus when it was proof of work, and I can just spin up a miner and then contribute my GPU. So with Quai, I think it's going to look very similar to when Ethereum launched and people were able to mine Ethereum kind of with one GPU rig, and we have a very specific focus on keeping it GPU heavy, so being ASIC resistant and ensuring that many people can just spin up their home computer and run a GPU while still being able to keep that profitable and keep that in a way that is providing adequate security without large mining pools and without other sort of added forms of centralization that exist on things like Bitcoin. So although Bitcoin is still highly decentralized from a node perspective, there are still very targeted ways in which mining pools could control the network and influence it that way.
Yeah, I mean, you go look at the charts online, you see Riot or whatever. But
that's a load. So that is extremely loaded, and because hash rate's very fluid. Anyone can move hash rate very quickly, and it's a lot easier to move than stake. But that is kind of exactly what we're trying to avoid, is those kind of large slices of that pie.
So the distribution of Quai, as you also have a very unique way of rolling out Quai in that you did so many test nets.
Yeah, so which is good, and we're probably going to get a lot of that kind of as we get to mainnet. It's just like, well, of course, there's kind of a bit of a pre-mine. We have a Genesis block, we have venture capital funding, we have these test nets, which people have helped to validate our software. And I think that's extremely crucial for this kind of technology, because what we're doing is so novel, and what we're doing takes these iterative approaches where we don't just want to YOLO mainnet and then have to hard fork or do something like preventing a DAO hack that happened with Ethereum. So we're being very cautious in how we test this, and that's very much in credit to the tech team and everyone on Carl's team testing this, because they're really doing a good job ensuring that this technology is world-class and works at scale under very rigorous conditions, because blockchains are hard to change. They're really difficult. Exactly. Yeah. And that's the point, because once you launch it, you're kind of not able to make a lot of decisions. You're very, very minimal. If you look at Bitcoin, hasn't really changed at all in terms of technology since the SegWit fork. Ethereum, very minor changes since they've moved to proof of stake. Sure, there's been an addition of blob space and 4844 and other ways that rollups can build easier, but they haven't really fundamentally changed much outside of 1559 as well. So for layer ones, it's kind of, you're stuck once you make a lot of those key decisions.
Yeah. So when Quai is going and the engine's running and it's all mainnet and everything, like do you think it's going to be like Ethereum, where you have almost like a council of all the different people that are making the proposals and adding blobs, for example? Like, is that going to be the way Quai operates, or you think it's just going to be one and done?
Yeah, I would think it'd be somewhere in between what Bitcoin and Ethereum look like.
Yeah.
We want to be very cognizant of the role that we play as the creators and the co-founders of the protocol. And I know that we're doing the work we can to ensure that there's enough community support and voices in the community that feel like they can go and participate and ensure that they have their perspective on the protocol. And I think we'll see a lot of that grow and evolve. So I'm excited for a future in which we kind of become more hands-off and the network operates, and we've done our job ahead of time, but there still will be voices in the community that can influence things. And so hopefully, it's good, but hopefully we'll be turning more towards like ecosystem growth and ensuring that people that are building in the community have what they need, that there's adequate resources and capital flowing into the system for builders to be able to launch products and create a good economy there.
What is the community like?
Today, it's thriving, I would say. It's growing. It's really getting to a point of self-sustainability. And people like Quaimark launching NFTs and having that platform, that was a huge lift. So kudos to them. And
they just did that.
So they were able to get started and they've iterated a ton. Like Quaimark has gone under so many upgrades and it looks really legit. I think it's getting to the point that it's actually, like it might end up like who knows, like a Magic Eden or like a TensorFlow or something, not TensorFlow, TensorTrade. And it's getting to a point of like legitimacy in which it's super easy to trade NFTs on Quai, which is cool. Same with Ice Cream Swap, there are DEX on Quai. So
this whole testnet Quai you're trading.
Yes, testnet Quai and sort of the ability to do testing on dApps. So it's getting to the point where things are popping up every day and it's kind of hard for me to track. We do want to enable certain use cases. So we see Quai being very powerful for the compute economy. So leveraging GPUs, tapping into ways that proof of work is useful as a sort of commodity token and as a more commodity-based asset. Energy money, exactly. Yeah. So some of our key partners that we're tailoring more towards are things like Lumerin, in which they can do Bitcoin hash rate marketplaces on Quai. So if I have Quai, I can buy Bitcoin hash rate eventually. Cool. and eventually Quai hash rate. So imagine you have some Quai, you could buy Quai hash rate. And that's almost like directly native staking on a proof of work system, which we think is super novel.
Yeah.
And enabling those and really doubling down on the compute economy is where we want to spend our time.
It's cool that there's so much, like, is it normal for like blockchains with testnets to have like all these different like projects build itself without even the token being live? Is that like normal?
Yeah, I mean, probably not before. So if you were to say like before 2023, probably not.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing that become more of a thing just because as we've gone through the crypto space, people are realizing these blockchains are super immutable. So you need to iterate with your community. And
because, like, for example, like when it say like, you know, it like took off like whatever 4 or 5 months ago and everyone started pumping it and everyone's obsessed. And like at that point in time, like they had one NFT marketplace, I think, and there was like 4 collections. But it's like you have like a whole nother test net, and you're close to mainnet, but it's still you have a whole nother iteration, but you already have marketplaces.
And that's the goal.
Yeah.
Because we want to ensure we have that all available on day one. Because if people, they've done their rewards and they've participated in campaigns, participated in testnet, we want them to be able to go and interact because they've done the work as well. And so it's a very multi-pronged approach in which these guys aren't the only guys developing in terms of, you know, getting the core technology done. It's a whole ecosystem. And I think probably closest to that would be like Berachain. And I know they're doing a ton of stuff right now as well with their testnets and making sure that all works. And I'm sure we'll see that with Monad and other chains that are kind of pre-TGE right now that are launching. So making those partnerships and building out this, you know, excitement around what we're doing with Quai and having them also sort of get the docs and all the implementations and all the details, because while we are EVM compatible, there are certain nuances. So we don't want to drop all of this technology day one on mainnet and then say figure it out and then wait 3 months. We want to make sure on day one we have everything we need.
Yeah, so EVM compatible. So you're talking about partners. Like, how does Quai partner with other blockchains?
Yeah.
So that's the question I'm going to,
So there are bridges, of course, and other ways that you could bridge liquidity and do unique drops. Ultimately, the layer 1 space is highly competitive. So I think it would be more so like the projects that you want to work with that are multi-chain and finding the communities that resonate well with what your mission is and having that be tied in. So we'd love to be able to tap into the liquidity on Bitcoin. We'd love to be able to utilize that in terms of miners as well. So that's a very synergistic area. And the Bitcoin space is evolving and thriving a ton as well. So that's kind of an area in which there's a ton of synergies, and I think the mindset and the shift is sort of coming that way, and we're going to see that continually grow, especially post-halving and with all of the just crazy things happening.
Do you think you can get Bitcoin like OGs, maxis to believe in Quai, or do you think they're going to be like stuck on Bitcoin?
Well,
because you're proof of work still,
right?
Like that's cool. Like people believe in if you're energy money, like people like energy money even if they don't like Ethereum.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the
so
idea itself.
I think there's various different types of people that are more open-minded in the Bitcoin space. So it depends all around the viability of the protocol and the uniqueness paired with the sort of purity of what they're trying to accomplish. So you're never going to convince all of the Bitcoiners, but I think you're still going to be able to show some people that certain technology has its merit and it has its merit for different purposes. So I think with Ethereum, that opened the door and it got a lot of people into programmable assets, to the EVM, and opened up a new sort of era of what's possible in terms of lending, borrowing, and programmability that is now kind of making its way back to Bitcoin as well. So you're able to experiment on these different frontiers, and creating these new protocols is a way of experimentation that may eventually end up back in Bitcoin. And we've actually thought it's kind of funny with some of our consensus algorithms and opening up potential proposals against Bitcoin and saying, hey, you can use this from Quai and Bitcoin and leverage that. So for us, I think there's value that is to be had. And if people recognize that and see it as useful to Bitcoin too, then they might jump on this train.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy to get the layer one to the fight, one fight of like people are like, well, how do you get enterprises to use your layer one? Like, Avalanche, they're like, oh, we got JP Morgan to do something or like whatever. Like, do you want Quai to be enterprise, like targeting enterprises, or you just going for the community and letting it happen, Yeah,
there's a flywheel. So you have to like get the right pieces in place. So when you talk about go to market, I think community for us is super important. We're in the Discord every day. We really see ourselves trying to build out that sustainable aspect of not only being a good layer in terms of approach and technical ability, but also just being there for people that want to develop. So if they have a question, they can be like, hey, I know I'm going to get an answer pretty quickly. It's going to be a reasonable answer, and I'm not just going to sit here and go somewhere else because of the time it took for me to try to figure out what I was trying to do on Quai Network. So we pride ourselves in that, and I think that really speaks to just the sort of approach in which you have to grow sort of incrementally. So being very crypto native at first and tapping into that and finding that a lot of these assets are more like around culture. If you look at especially layer ones, it's very culture heavy. So building that culture, reinforcing it, and ensuring that people can see that ultimate mission down the line, in which, sure, at some day it will make sense for enterprises to deploy on Quai. What that day is, I don't know. Can't pinpoint it.
You don't have to worry about it.
Exactly, but there is the infrastructure in place for them to do it. And we want to enable those use cases. But in order to get there, I mean, we're just now seeing enterprises deploy on things like Ethereum and Bitcoin and tapping in. I mean, we're getting ETFs. These assets are becoming legit. They're becoming normalized in terms of just having them in your portfolio if you have 401ks and retirement funds. So I think it's a very long road for crypto ahead, but there is a future in which all of those use cases should be enabled because layer ones are so fundamental, in which if you were to say like you're an AI chain or you're a DePIN chain or you're a specific thing, like I think most of the time, all of these places that are just serving block space will become commoditized because if it's interesting and useful, it will attract all different things that can be deployed. So what we want to enable is builders to do what they want to do as fast and as cheaply as possible.
Yeah, and they'll just pick you because that's the way it is.
Yep.
Yeah. That's true. I mean, if you have your community is active, like the layer one as a business is fairly unique because it's competitive, but if you have a community, then you're successful, even if it's like a unique community, even if it like fills a specific gap or whatever. Like if you're creating your own...
the layer one crypto space is insane. And I think we've seen a lot of these exist for so long, and things like Dogecoin, Ripple, and all sorts of other projects are still hanging out in the top 10. And for that as an asset, like it blows my mind. Polkadot as well. And so we need to enable a new frontier of use cases with new technology, and we're only going to do that with experimentation. And I think Quai is offering a new home for people that want to experiment.
Yeah, let's talk about proof of work.
Sure.
Right? Just lay it on me. Like talk about the proof of work renaissance is what you said before this. Great phrase. I want to learn about it.
So we see proof of work as a fundamentally underexplored and underutilized consensus mechanism for people that want to achieve a lot of the different things that are attempted in proof of stake. And so there has kind of been a full circle moment in which we kind of had everything de facto for proof of stake launching in 2018 onwards.
Yeah.
If you were going to build a protocol, you're going to be proof of stake, and that's kind of how it is. And everyone kind of accepted that. That comes with its own challenges in terms of distribution, as I talked about earlier. How do people get the asset? We saw the ICO phase somewhat go away, so then we went heavily into the airdrop sort of approach in which people had to distribute tokens that way because there's more regulatory scrutiny to ICOs. I think, again, that pendulum's kind of swinging back. We've seen Europe somewhat become more friendly to ICOs, and I think Gary Gensler kind of hinted at a retirement, so maybe that might get better for crypto as well.
Is that
so we'll see.
Though?
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. But I think
job's not finished for him. I feel like.
Oh goodness, it's going to be a hectic year. But yeah. I think the proof of work approach is we're saying everyone has been experimenting in one side of the world. So where is the experimentation in proof of work, and what can we do to tap into that and enable it with all of these great ideas that we had previously? So things like MEV have been a bottleneck. Things like scalability have been a challenge. Fragmentation, liquidity, having all of the different protocols try to rely on each other and build these bridges. So there's a way in which we sort of took a step back and we said, with Quai, we're going to go further back in time and kind of branch off and make our own path and blaze our own trail. And with proof of work and the renaissance there, not only is it the idea in which this technology needs to be explored, but it's also the ethos behind it. So we're seeing things like Bitcoin get more adoption with ordinals, runes, BRC20, again, ETFs, just Bitcoin as an asset still leading the way. And that kind of challenges the notion of like, well, if I'm concerned about energy, I'm concerned about all of the emissions that come from proof of work, or I'm concerned about what it's doing for the environment. Well, you still have to see by market cap, Bitcoin is by and large the biggest. So that, and then other
people
tokens,
actually concerned about that.
Exactly. And I think it does a really good thing for the environment, which we can touch on in a second. But fundamentally, I see that proof of work is an area that has a really interesting sort of embodiment of ideals and beliefs. We see Quai being part of that renaissance and want to tap into that as much as we can.
So it's part of the renaissance. Like, how many other novel projects are doing proof of work? Because people are like, oh wow, Bitcoin is popping off, like all this new stuff, but it sounds like it's not just Bitcoin. It's also, I mean, obviously,
there's tons. Correct. So I think everything is enabled right now, especially in the Bitcoin ecosystem, by Bitcoin layer 2s. So I think, like it seems like almost every week there's a new Bitcoin layer 2 being funded on top of Bitcoin. And I'd say on top of those, like Stacks. I know Stacks is a good presence in Austin. And then there's Botanics as well, I think is another one, like EVM enabling on top of Bitcoin. And then with that, all the other infrastructure for the Bitcoin ecosystem. I think Magic Eden now is adding more support for Bitcoin.
Do you think like Bitcoin layer 2s though have legs though, as compared to like a proof of work that's built from like proof of
from
work
the ground up?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, great question. So I think you're going to see better liquidity transfer maybe between Bitcoin, just because it has that brand, and that's really all it is. You're tapping into that brand, but you're also tapping into the sort of legacy and tech debt of Bitcoin, and you're kind of hurdled or you're sort of like kneecapped by that.
You're trying to fix things that weren't meant to be fixed.
Exactly. And so we're getting these really interesting protocols and solutions, and it's like, cool, like now I have a Bitcoin layer 2 that's EVM and it is working somewhat, and eventually that might scale to some degree, but you're still burdened by everything from the Bitcoin side. So I think that's still a market that needs to be played out, and we're going to see all of these layer 2s come to fruition, and we'll see eventually, will they kind of look like Ethereum layer 2s again, because Ethereum's already done this, and they've already done the layer 2 song and dance just 2 years before Bitcoin has. So what will that environment look like? I don't know the answer yet. I still see layer 1s being the most competitive in terms of viability, because at the end of the day, blockchains are meant to be decentralized, and you're going to get the most decentralized answer in the layer 1 itself. So the viability of a layer 2 is yet to be proven.
Yeah, so just one step back, one question back. We're talking about all the different projects in the proof of work renaissance. Like, how much is, so we're talking about, there's a lot of Bitcoin ones going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
New Bitcoin layer 2s every week or whatever. What else is happening like Quai?
Yeah,
what else is going on?
There's been a ton of other newer layer 1s in the proof of work space, specifically things like Caspa, Alephium, Ergo, Nervos, and others that have sort of looked at scalability with a mix of different approaches in terms of programmability and ways to sort of tap into community. And I think a lot of these rely pretty heavily on that mining community. So Caspa specifically is directly partnered with people like Bitmain and aligned with Bitmain.
So they're like
Caspa
trying to
ASICs
target
that
those
are coming out.
users and bring them over to
Correct.
their yeah.
And so that's been one of their main growth strategies is like these miners are evangelists and we want them to really champion the protocol and grow. So I think kind of outside of that, those are some of the ones that we look at and see you guys are really championing this with us as well. So let's create a good community around it and ensure that all of the miners can kind of move across and
they can mine
look
everything
same.
at once.
Exactly. That's kind of like the goal. And of course, there's like nuance in hardware, and realistically, not everyone can mine everything due to what you have. But those protocols specifically are more ASIC focused. And so they're going to be targeting things that are very industrial and sort of large setups. But with Quai, we want to be more GPU focused, more hobbyist mining, more sort of at home mining.
Yeah, more power to the people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's definitely the goal.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it sounds like, I mean, just the way you're approaching all the sharding and all that stuff is very different, I assume, from the other layer ones in the proof of work renaissance. Yeah.
Yeah, we are the only scalable proof of work layer 1 with EVM contracts.
Okay, yeah. And I don't know how future-proof other ones would be without that, right?
Yeah. So there's a lot of nuance too as well with like EVM and UTXOs and how people approach that with scalability and having sort of conflicts in UTXO set resolution with many different block producers and their type of sharding and approach to creating scale there. So a lot of rabbit holes to dive down on.
Yeah, there's too many in crypto, man.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I'm trapped in I'm trapped in Ethereum world. It's so much.
Yeah, I found my way to degen chain, and I don't know how long I was there, but yeah.
I was there for only a few days, but people in the HX DAO Telegram, like today, they're like, "What about degen chain?" I'm like, "Don't pull me back.
Don't pull me back to that place." But I think experimentation is important, and I think with all of these different layer 1, layer 2s, layer 3s eventually, and different things, I think the market just needs to figure it out. And
Quai doesn't need a layer 2.
Exactly.
Quai doesn't need a layer 3.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a huge value proposition. There's no friction there to users and to the experience. Yeah. So we see that as a huge win.
Yeah, you just touched on this about in the last section, but talking about the environment.
Yeah.
I know it's like it's a buzzword topic.
Yeah.
But would love to hear your defense of proof of work in the environment, because I also think it's good for the environment. But
the environment is a touchy subject for a lot of people, especially when crypto gets really big. People are like, in the next 10 years, Bitcoin's going to kill the planet. And all of the ice caps and icebergs are going to be melted and sea levels are going to rise because Bitcoin is taking all this energy. But in reality, what it's doing is it's ensuring that we can tap into renewable resources more efficiently and effectively. And with that, those previous resources weren't economically viable to utilize because there's no way to connect a sort of landfill that's emitting methane back into the grid that's 30 miles away, and there's no way to tap into solar that's shining out in the desert because there's no cities around it. So how do we get all of these stranded resources in a way that can be monetized? And mining is the answer to that. Bitcoin mining largely right now. Eventually, I think it's going to kind of become more distributed across other cryptocurrencies. I know some larger miners do experiment with other cryptocurrencies. Hopefully Quai is one of those.
Well, you're in Texas.
Exactly. So we do want to partner with those people. And so if you look at it just based off of like a game theory behavior is we have all of this free energy, almost like literally free energy. And I know in times in Texas, like it's dirt cheap. And we have these cryptocurrencies that can be mined and be produced and then transferred. So I can go and mine Bitcoin and then send it wherever I want in the world and have that be a usable thing in terms of a monetary asset. So there's now an incentive for people to go and capture that energy, create a cryptocurrency, and then send it across the globe and then use it for whatever they want. And that really creates the ability to eventually take these resources and then put them back into the grid whenever it makes sense. So the sort of plan would be, well, I have a landfill that is creating some amount of methane or, again, solar farm, wind farm, you name it, hydroelectric. And then say the city grows or like it becomes cheaper to transport this energy directly back into the city, then I no longer mine the Bitcoin or I mine the Quai, I use it for selling it back. And so the thing that occurs most in Texas is people are mining Bitcoin and then things like a ice storm happen. And then with the ice storm, it's like, oh shoot, people need all of this energy because a substation went down or the grid is about to literally turn off. So I'm going to stop mining Bitcoin and sell that back into the grid because it's more profitable to do so. It's purely just game theory and it's purely just a sort of
very
economic
cool.
rationality.
Yeah.
So it's super cool. And I think what that does is it allows us to bolster the capacity of our grids. We're able to reinforce them. We're able to put sustained load on them because people are mining 24/7. And we actually have the ability to have an incentive to go create renewable energy.
Yeah. No, I went to the North American Blockchain Summit and got super proof of work pilled.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do a really good job at it. We're part of the Texas Blockchain Council, and we see huge opportunity there with them. And they have a ton of people that are in the nitty gritty there on how to actually do it. Like you see some of their setups, it's great.
It's awesome. I mean, I went out to I forget what the actual mining company was, but it was like stranded natural gas out in like part of Fort Worth. Saw how they did it. I was like, this is so cool.
Yeah, I think the city of Fort Worth runs a Bitcoin miner.
Do.
Yeah.
They do.
I have some stories about UT trying to run miners because UT is actually on their own grid. They produce,
really?
Yeah, they produce their own energy. So
That's cool.
UT sells energy back to the city of Austin. And so I was trying to get them to run some Bitcoin miners, and they wouldn't let us. So
Yeah. Texas is a very unique place with energy.
it is. Yeah, I mean, the state of Texas, I mean, oil and gas, huge. And so when you look at flared gas mitigation, making sure you don't send it into the atmosphere and you pipe it and then use it for mining, I think that's super crucial.
Yeah, I think the idea that you can reduce pollution from Bitcoin mining is wild. It's just like a wild thing that it seems it's so counterintuitive. And I wish it was people understood it more.
Yeah. So if you look at some of the flared gas mitigation and methane specifically on landfills, methane is anywhere from 15 to 35 times more potent to the atmosphere than
CO2.
Yeah, than CO2. So kind of pound for pound, you're making Bitcoin carbon negative.
I heard that's like over some amount of years in the future, Bitcoin will be carbon negative as an industry. Which is like, I hope people learn that. Yeah. Maybe we'll have some, I don't know, there's too much FUD, but.
Yeah, I mean, getting that narrative out is super important. And with Quai, we want to take part in that as well.
What is your energy and how intense is mining Quai versus like Bitcoin?
So it depends on the capacity and the hash rate of the network. So something like a GPU is different in terms of energy efficiency than, say, an ASIC. And the comparable would just kind of be on how much capacity you want to run. So if you're an industrial miner, you kind of just run at like a base megawatt capacity, and then, or a certain amount of megawatts compared to whether it's ASICs or GPUs. So you kind of just fill that capacity. But at home, you're able to run a GPU in your computer because it's sort of smaller, more efficient, but I don't run an ASIC sort of at home due to like the voltage requirements and other ways.
You can run it as a heater.
Yeah, you could plug it into your oven socket.
Yeah.
You can't plug it into like a normal wall socket. So that's the main trade-off there. So making it kind of more accessible to run with GPUs.
One of your slogans, I don't know if it is anymore, but it's like the future of money, right? The future of currency and stuff. Like 10 years down the line, Quai is booming. Like in your dreams, in your like your vision, because obviously like this, you put like your heart and soul into this. Right? You've built a whole community globally. You built a whole team, and it's been something you've been building since you were like, young, right?
Yeah.
What does it look like when you're sitting and you're doing your CEO stuff and you're thinking?
Yeah, I mean, 10 years ecosystem is like super important.
Yeah.
So really, we haven't seen a ton of blockchains reach 10 years. I mean, Bitcoin, I think, is at 15, just over. Ethereum is getting to the point of 10 years.
Do we think that like a lot of these blockchains aren't going to make it 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, you probably won't see a ton of them. And if they do, they'll kind of just fade into obscurity. And some, even the layer 2s kind of fall off too. So I think hitting a decade is like a huge milestone for a lot of these. And really, if you look at what money is, even money sort of has its lifespan. I think the euro is like 25 years old. The US dollar itself, as we know it, is 50 years old. So looking at currencies, they also have their window. Bitcoin is just now starting to hit its stride in terms of a global currency. So Bitcoin at some point will ultimately fail as a currency, likely not in the next decade. So? Yeah, I mean, not in the next decade, but we know for sure that it's not going to be emitting any Bitcoin for a block reward by 2040 or 20 in 100 years, basically. 120 years, there's going to be no more Bitcoin.
You think the transaction fee versus mining is going to be like a real problem?
That's a speculative debate for sure, but at the end of the day, that we know is not going to be a case from the miners, and then you kind of get into these like MEV debates around transaction fees and what people are paying for. So like, sure, it may be sustainable, but also there's going to be new monetary bases that are going to be created like Quai that can compete. So is that going to be the preferred place, or will that value sort of move elsewhere?
It's actually really interesting
as it has for other currencies.
because it'll make the mining operation as an industry more like the longevity will increase if there's more like competitive layer ones doing proof of work like Quai. When I'm a miner and I've been like for years and years built a business on Bitcoin mining, and the rewards keep getting halved, it's not enough. Oh, I can go to Quai, and now my operation is sustainable for more years.
Yeah, I mean the halving is literally tomorrow night, I think, and rewards for Bitcoin miners are going to chop in half.
Yeah,
it likely should be priced in just because it's an efficient market, but it's going to get pretty hectic. So I think for miners, they have to look at these other assets and they say, what is it going to look like if this is my industry for so long? I have all this hardware. Ultimately, they're just sellers of energy. If you look at miners, that's like their main business. They have a sustainable revenue stream and they want things to be pretty consistent. And there's speculation on top of that with the crypto assets themselves. But for the next decade, I think it's going to be a more crypto native economy as a whole. I think we're going to see these assets emerge and be taken seriously. If you look at sort of nation state dollars and how governments influence their currency and have control over their people with that.
Government currencies aren't that cool anymore.
No, they're not. They're not very cool. But I would say USDC is pretty cool, but the CBDCs are not very cool. And there's a lot of different opinions on that. I think USDC may eventually sort of tend into a CBDC if we're not careful.
If you saw the stablecoin bill that dropped yesterday,
I did not.
It's I don't think it's going to go very far, but it very much like hints at the USDC. It can be a CBDC.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
which is like, oh man, don't break my heart like that.
I've been telling some of our team that for the past year. It's like they could very easily make that a CBDC, and I think that's the kind of future that we have to have alternatives against. And that's the beauty. As much as like crypto is almost like so for freedom that it kind of aligns against what America is trying to do, I think America can still be a very crypto forward place if we allow freedom to lead its course and ensure that people have the ability to choose without being limited and restricted. And I think it's a scary future if you like look at places like Canada that are limiting the amount of Bitcoin people can buy. I think that's ridiculous. If you look at places like China that have all sorts of surveillance and have all sorts of restrictions on society, I think we want to avoid that. So if you're challenging this notion or you're thinking like these guys are building something super whack, they're trying to like evade all these laws and build all this new technology, I think that's like not the case. We're just building technology that people can use freely and ultimately have published as code in terms of like freedom of speech. So that's kind of like our goal there, and ensuring that, going back to your question on 10 years, it's like, have we created the system that echoes that sentiment and ensures that that sentiment lives on and people can freely access it and not be limited or controlled by single entities?
Are you like, what is the Quai? I guess they're testers, right? Or they're still mining. Like they were getting the rewards.
Yeah.
Where is it distributed globally? Like,
good question. So we saw a lot of participation in Vietnam because they have a lot of GPU mining there. Cool. So that was a really like random thing that kind of popped up during testnet actually, because they had a ton of Ethereum miners there, and Ethereum miners were GPU based, and that would sort of play well with Quai mining. So Vietnam, funny enough, in Europe as well, although like Germany kind of has high energy prices. We saw some people there. Texas here, of course, there was a lot of people that were mining Quai, and then kind of just spread out globally outside of that. But it's hard to pinpoint. Like looking at a map, you'd kind of be like, it's pretty much across the globe.
That's good.
And all of the main places in which there's people with crypto knowledge and access to internet and have previously mined Ethereum.
That's good. Nice. And we can get a Quai stablecoin going to prevent the CBDC.
Yeah, that's what we got Chief for, man. We got energy-based money. So that's a whole another rabbit hole. Yeah, so Quai is the only scalable proof-of-work blockchain that has EVM-compatible smart contracts, which is super useful for builders, people that want to get on a blockchain really easily and tie it into what they know and love already.
Mic drop,
and yeah, our goal is to tap into the compute economy, as I said earlier, and revolutionize proof of work.
Nice. That's a mic drop.
Yeah.
The only scalable proof of work with EVM.
Yeah. That's how we do it. But yeah, I can't really think of anything else that we may have missed. I think we're nearing about the 50-minute mark. But, I think super grateful for the community that we have. And it's been a very iterative process. I would say, my time as an entrepreneur and building this company has enabled me to grow as a person and grow as a leader. And we've really built a great team. So I'd say like shout out to the people that are here and putting in the work and ensuring that we can ship this thing. Building a layer one is no easy effort. And we've been very diligent, although, not as potentially fast or as quick or some of the other people. We've been here putting in the work to make sure it turns out well. So that's kind of our main effort and our main goal.
Well, I mean, you're taking your time, and you guys are still going. Like,
yeah.
We talked about this. Was it the other day on the phone or something? It's like you were able to make it through multiple bear market without launching a token, which is like nice. That's good.
It is good. And so like I think like a lot of it is like luck and timing. Yeah. So I think there was like a recent chart on crypto Twitter that like plotted the TGEs of certain tokens like with the Bitcoin chart. I was like, that's pretty funny because that's like so much ties into just like luck with the market and sentiment. But also, you know, the thing that will win out is basically the people that stay the longest and commit and build. Like if you outwit and outlast, you're going to you're going to outsurvive. So that's kind of the main goal.
Nice. What are there other projects besides Quai you're interested in right now?
Yeah, I talked a bit about the proof of work renaissance earlier and some of the people that are
the
in
ones
that.
to look
I'd
into.
say, yeah, having is super important. I've been trying to tap into the communities of the ordinals and the runes and the people that are in the proof of work space and ensuring that they feel the love of Quai and that we're watching them.
Nice. We're watching.
Yeah, I mean, I think we want to, find those people that can really resonate with that sentiment, and those people and those communities are probably most like-minded.
Nice. And what can ATX DAO do to help Quai in the Austin community? How can we, I want to do, I know I told you this already, I want to do a the mining workshop or whatever, because I need help setting up my stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we got to get the events going. So
Yeah.
I think the events and just having everybody be involved in the community in the process. I know I'm always in the ATX DAO Discord and Telegram more so nowadays.
Yeah, we got to get the Discord going again. The Telegram's been popping.
The Telegram's good, but ultimately just the events, and I think we'll find ways to align. The mining workshop would be good if we can get that rolling. Hackathons could be good once we get closer to mainnet and we can weave in ecosystem things, especially around Austin because there's a ton of builders here.
I love that you guys are like you're like a local business, but you're like like a blockchain.
Yeah.
That's hardcore.
Yeah, it's a weird industry to be in to say because like a lot of people don't get it, and you're like, people are just like, what do you guys do? Or, like, how do you explain this to normal people? But like if you're in crypto, you get it. But yeah, I think ATX DAO has been super instrumental in just like supporting us, ensuring that you guys are able to be here in Austin with us and like just take in what we're doing and resonate and have it almost be like feedback just of like where we should go and like how we should help tailor the message. And the events are always fun, so we got to keep doing those and having more of a community turnout.
I mean, just for the listeners and everything, like you guys, Quai, like you guys are instrumental to the growth of HX DAO, like that first year. Like obviously you as a founding member with me and everybody, but you guys you put HX DAO on with the first 3 events, like killer, boom, boom, boom.
Early sponsors, and like I think a lot of our team were Genesis members as well. We just got Riley in, and so
you hired Riley.
Yeah, exactly. So hey, y'all keep finding talented engineers, and we'll hire them. That'll be good. But yeah, I think there's a lot of synergy here. So it's a good place to be.
Dude, it's good catching up, good hearing in detail what you're working on and everything. And thank you for being part of the community.
Yeah, thank you, Mason. I appreciate you having me.